Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into one of the most cheerfully engineered, financially lopsided, and thoroughly pastel-colored business schemes in American history. The Tupperware home party system, which turned suburban living rooms into retail floors, housewives into an unpaid sales force, and a foul-smelling byproduct of oil refining into a $25 million a year empire. Not with boardrooms, not with advertising budgets. With percolated coffee, a bowl in Millionaire's Lime, and a parlor game specifically designed to lower your resistance to spending money on storage containers. If you're the one who suggested this one, thank you, genuinely. You have excellent taste and a healthy suspicion of anything that comes with a free gift for hosting. If you enjoy this kind of gently horrifying, warmly lit, deeply factual history, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually want to. Leave a comment with your town, and whatever your clock claims it is. Judging by this comment section, a respectable number of you are up in the small hours with only the refrigerator light for company. And honestly, that's the right audience for this story. And if your grandmother had a Jubilee-era turquoise Wonderlier bowl that she guarded like it was load-bearing, feel free to mention that too. Switch the lamp down low, let a fan hum away somewhere across the room, and settle yourself in under the blanket, sealed in loosely, like good leftovers, with just enough air that someone could burp you out in the morning. Have you ever wondered how a product that failed spectacularly in every retail store in America ended up in nearly every kitchen in the country? How do you build a sales force of 9,000 women without technically employing a single one of them? What exactly was happening in a living room at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday when the music stopped and you were the one holding the bowl? Could you survive a business model where your startup costs, your gas, your phone bill, and your unsold inventory were all, legally speaking, your problem? The tiaras, the buried Cadillac, and when the woman who built the whole thing from a folding table in her living room got fired, what exactly did she walk away with? Congratulations. You've just woken up in suburban America, 1954. There is a frigid air in your kitchen the size of a filing cabinet, a shallow cabinet with no plan for Tuesday's leftover pot roast, and a neighbor who has just called to invite you to a party that is, in ways you won't fully understand until the order forms come out, a store. Good luck. You open the refrigerator at 7 in the morning and begin the daily negotiation. 8 cubic feet of space, and every inch of it is already spoken for. The milk bottle, the butter dish. Last night's roast, balanced on a plate, covered with a second plate, because that's the technology. You move the roast to reach the eggs. You move the eggs to reach the milk. Something in the back has been there long enough that you've stopped making eye contact with it. The refrigerator is full, and somehow nothing in it is dinner. Let's talk about that roast. It's wrapped in the only system available, a plate on top of a plate, sealed with nothing but optimism and gravity. The edges of the meat are already doing something. Not spoiling, not fine, just actively becoming a different roast than the one you served last night. You could put it in a bowl. The bowl doesn't seal. The bowl is a suggestion. The cabinets aren't helping. They're shallow, roughly the depth of a good intention, and stacked with things that don't stack. A flour canister that lost its lid sometime in the previous administration. A wax paper roll that gave up in November. 3 mismatched lids that don't match anything currently in the kitchen, but you keep them because the right bowl is definitely coming back. This is where Beverly Kowalski from 2 streets over would have opened her mouth at a neighbor's living room party in 1952 and said, quietly, that she had the same problem. And then the demonstrator, a woman named Carol, standing near the credenza with a bowl the color of key lime pie, would have pressed her thumb against a lid, released one edge, and let the air escape. The sound was soft. A small exhale, like something finally admitting it was solved. Carol would hand the bowl to Beverly and say, "Now you try." And Beverly would press down, release the edge, and feel the seal give exactly once before snapping back airtight. The color was called Millionaire's Lime. Not lime. Millionaire's Lime. There was also beetroot, sable, and marigold. You could spend a moment with those names. They don't sound like plastic. They sound like a hotel menu in a city you've never been to but would like to visit. The containers sat on Carol's demonstration cloth, glowing faintly under the lamp, translucent, pastel, almost soft-looking. Not the dull grey of industrial plastics. Not the Lustro-Ware knockoff at Woolworths for 19 cents, which existed and did technically hold food. These were different. They had the specific visual quality of something a little out of your reach presented at just the right moment inside your own living room by someone you already knew. The 7-piece starter set was $3.95. That's about a day and a half of your husband's wage. It is a real decision. Not a large one, but a real one. The kind you make by looking at the roast under the plate and then looking at the millionaire's lime bowl and then deciding that $3.95 is, in the end, a reasonable price to stop negotiating with your refrigerator every morning at 7. The bowl has opinions, it turns out, good ones, and it isn't going anywhere. You scrape half a meatloaf into the garbage on Thursday and you feel it in your chest because that meatloaf was money. Your husband brings home the paycheck, but you're the one who has to stretch it across 7 days of dinners, and every wilted lettuce head is a small accounting failure that nobody sees but you. Wax paper doesn't seal. Foil tears. The icebox dries everything into leather by Wednesday. You're fighting a war against air itself, and air is winning. Let's talk about the refrigerator. Your 1950 Frigidaire has 8 cubic feet of usable space, which is roughly the size of a large microwave and a half, and it came with no airtight containers worth naming. The butter dish has a lid that sits on rather than seals. The vegetable crisper is a tray that crisps nothing. The leftover pork chop sits on a plate covered with an inverted bowl, and the inverted bowl tips over by Tuesday, and by Wednesday the pork chop has developed a personality you didn't authorize. A pound of ground beef in 1954 costs about 50 cents. A whole week's groceries on a working-class budget runs somewhere between $15 and $20. You have no margin for food that goes off, and food goes off constantly, because the tools available to you were designed for a world that didn't yet understand what airtight actually meant. Wax paper is doing its best. Its best is insufficient. The chemistry behind this problem is, on reflection, somewhat embarrassing. The enemy isn't complicated. It's oxygen. It's moisture. It's a pork chop sitting in open air slowly becoming a philosophical statement about entropy. Home economists writing in women's magazines offer advice. The advice is mostly store it sooner and check it often, which is less advice and more an accusation. Meanwhile, in a workshop in Farnhamsville, Massachusetts, a farmer's son named Earl Tupper is reading Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich and keeping journals full of things he intends to own. Not vague aspirations, specific inventories. He lists houses. He lists acreage. He lists amounts. Earl Tupper's relationship with money is less a plan and more an ongoing negotiation with the universe, and he is confident the universe will come around. He joined DuPont in 1937 to learn industrial plastics, left in 1938 to go it alone, and spent the war years making plastic gas masks and feeling like he was slightly ahead of the world. The world, for its part, had not yet noticed him, which the journals took personally. The raw material he started with was polyethylene slag, a greasy, foul-smelling byproduct of oil refining that DuPont had stockpiled mostly because throwing it away felt wasteful. It smelled like what it was. It handled like something that shouldn't be food adjacent. Tupper spent years purifying it, filtering out the smell, persuading it to become flexible and translucent, and, crucially, odorless. What he ended up with was a plastic that behaved unlike any other plastic of its era. It didn't crack in the cold, it didn't leach, it bent without breaking. He was very pleased with it. He was also, by most accounts, the only person who had ever been pleased with polyethylene slag. He named it Poly-T, material of the future, which sounds like something from a science fair, and is exactly the energy Earl Tupper brought to everything. The seal came later, and the seal is the whole thing. Tupper modelled it on a paint can lid, press the centre down, release one edge with your thumb, and the vacuum does the rest. A small exhale of air, a soft resistance. Then the lid sits, snug, level, and quietly smug. He patented it in 1947. The burp, as it would come to be called, was not a flaw. It was the proof of concept. It was the sound of air losing. You don't know any of this on Thursday, scraping the meatloaf. You just know the foil tore again. You find the invitation in your mailbox on a Tuesday. Dorothy, 3 houses down, is hosting a Tupperware party next Thursday at 2 o'clock, and your name is on the card. You understand immediately that this is not really an invitation. It's a summons. Dorothy came to your church bake sale. Dorothy bought raffle tickets from your son. The ledger of neighbourhood obligations is unwritten but precisely kept, and right now it shows a balance in Dorothy's favor. You check the calendar, but you already know you're going. The demonstrator's name is Carol. Carol called Dorothy 10 days ago, and Dorothy said yes. And then Dorothy spent the next week making 10 to 15 phone calls to confirm 8 attendees. That's Dorothy's job. Dorothy's compensation for this, for the calls, the coffee cake, the cleaning, and the surrendering of her living room for an afternoon, is one free Tupperware item from the hostess gift program. A bowl, maybe. A canister, something in Millionaire's lime. Dorothy receives it with genuine delight, which says something either very warm about Dorothy or very precise about the 1950s, and possibly both. You arrive at 2 o'clock. The living room smells like percolated coffee, laundry starch, and something faintly chemical and new. That's the Tupperware, still in its case, radiating a clean plastic optimism. Carol is already set up. The containers are arranged on a folding table draped in a cloth, the pastel colours catching the lamplight in a way that dull store-shelf plastics never quite manage. Beetroot next to sable, next to marigold. They glow slightly, smooth, pastel, and faintly pleased with themselves. They look like they belong in a magazine, which is the point. Let's talk about the games. Carol produces a Tupperware bowl and starts the music, someone's portable record player, a cheerful 45. The bowl gets passed around the circle. The music stops. Whoever is holding it has to answer a question. The question is always friendly. Favorite recipe. Funniest kitchen disaster. The game feels spontaneous. It is not spontaneous. Carol's training manual covers this in some detail. The games exist to do a specific thing. By the time you've laughed with these women and shared a small embarrassing story, you're no longer a potential customer. You're a participant. The bowl in your hands has a social history now. Putting it down costs more than it did 10 minutes ago. Then Carol demonstrates the seal. She presses the lid down, runs a thumb under one edge, and releases it. The air escapes with a soft, definitive burp. The room reacts the way rooms always react to this. A ripple of surprised laughter, then immediate interest. She passes the container to the woman on her left. That woman tries it, gets it on the second attempt, passes it right. This goes around the entire circle. By the time the bowl returns to Carol, every person in the room has successfully operated the seal with her own hands, which means every person in the room has already decided, on some level, that she knows how to use this thing. The decision about whether to buy has quietly rearranged itself into a decision about how much to buy. Carol didn't say that out loud. She didn't need to. A demonstrator named Ruth, not Carol, a different woman 3 towns over doing this exact same afternoon simultaneously. They will later write in a letter that she earned enough in 1956 to put her daughter through 2 semesters of community college. Ruth netted somewhere between $25 and $50 a week. Ruth worked 20 to 30 hours for that. The federal minimum wage that year was $1 an hour. Ruth was an independent contractor, so the math didn't apply to her legally. The math applied to her in every other way. Back in Dorothy's living room, the order forms come out. Carol writes everything in triplicate on carbon paper, pressing firmly. You order the 7-piece set, $3.95. That's a real number in 1954. You think about the leftovers that won't go to waste, the refrigerator that's been losing the battle against Tuesday's pot roast, the shallow cabinet that's never had a lid that actually fit. You think about Millionaire's lime, and whether that counts as a treat. It does, a little. You put your name on the form, and Carol smiles at you like you've done something right. You have, actually, just not only for yourself. You stand in front of your closet on Thursday morning deciding what you wear to a sales demonstration disguised as a coffee clatch. Too dressy and you look like you're trying to outshine Dorothy in her own living room. Too casual and the neighborhood notes it. You settle on the shirtwaist dress. The good one but not the best one. You also need to bring your pocketbook, because everyone knows what happens at these parties, and arriving without money would be its own kind of statement. You count out what you can spend before you leave the house. The number you land on is somewhere between $3 and $8, which puts you squarely in the market for the 7-piece set, a canister, or, if you're feeling the particular social pressure that comes from sitting in Dorothy's living room eating Dorothy's coffee cake, possibly both, a $1951 still has opinions about itself. This is a real purchase decision, the kind you'd think about for a week if a salesman in a store suggested it. Here, the salesman is your neighbor, and she's refilling your cup. Let's talk about that cup. There's a percolator in Dorothy's kitchen that's been running since 9:30, and by the time you arrive, the coffee has achieved a density approaching geology. Someone has laid out a coffee cake on a pressed glass plate, and the whole room smells like roasted grounds, laundry starch, and whoever is sitting nearest to you, which is Chanel No. 5 or Tebu depending on the day. The pastel containers are already arranged on the dining room table, glowing faintly under the lamp like they're auditioning for something. Millionaire's lime, beetroot, marigold. Carol recites the names the way a maitre recites the specials. With weight. You have already played the game, which stopped on you, which means you had to answer a question in front of everyone, which means you have already laughed at yourself in a group setting, which is, it turns out, excellent preparation for signing an order form. The icebreaker game isn't in the manual labelled sales psychology. It's just a fun thing Carol does at the start. It lands the same either way. Now you're in the part of the party that is technically still a party. Carol is showing you the seal. She presses the center of the lid down. She releases one edge with her thumb. The container exhales, that soft, flat, unmistakable burp, and she passes it to Margaret on your left. Margaret presses and releases. Another burp. She passes it to you. You press. You release. The air goes. Something in your brain says, yes, this works. I understand this. I am competent. I would like to own this. That is not an accident. The burp-seal is a paint can lid, technically. What it is, experientially, is a small demonstration of mastery, delivered at close range, timed perfectly. Virginia Alcott, who is sitting across from you in the good armchair, the one by the window, holds the bowl for slightly too long before passing it, because Virginia has the seal figured out and she wants everyone to know. Virginia always has the seal figured out. Virginia is going to buy the full set plus the canisters, and she's going to look comfortable doing it. And you feel this somehow as a competitive event, which is also not an accident. The order forms come out. Carol sets hers on the TV tray with the practiced ease of someone who has done this 43 times, which she has. You pick up the carbon copy sheet. The smell of fresh polyethylene drifts over from the display, faint and slightly chemical and oddly clean, the product of years of Earl Tupper processing foul industrial slag into something that doesn't smell like anything. The containers sit in a row, translucent, flexible, and faintly luminous. Nothing in a Woolworths looks like this. Lustroware is 10 cents at Woolworths, and it looks exactly like what it costs. You write down the 7-piece set. You consider the canister. You think about your refrigerator, a 1950 Frigidaire with roughly the storage capacity of a large suitcase, and the way leftovers currently live wrapped in wax paper, slowly becoming other things. You write down the canister. Virginia has already closed her form. Of course she has. You arrive at Dorothy's at 2 o'clock and the choreography begins before you're through the door. The percolator is going. There's a coffee cake on the table, baked from a recipe in a Tupperware pamphlet, though you don't know that yet. 8 women are arranging themselves on the davenport and the dining chairs that have been carried in, and where you sit matters. Too close to the front and you're a target. Too far back and you look unfriendly. You take a middle seat and accept a cup of coffee you didn't ask for. The demonstrator's name is Carol. She has a name tag. It says Carol. She sets a bowl on the coffee table like she's placing a centerpiece in a cathedral, then smiles at everyone in a smooth, practiced arc that manages to land on each face individually without actually stopping on any of them. She's done this 18 times this month. You cannot tell. Let's talk about the icebreaker. There is always an icebreaker. Carol produces a pastel bowl, millionaire's lime, she says, and says it with the reverence of someone describing a paint chip at an art museum, and passes it to the woman on her left with the instruction to keep it moving while the music plays. When the music stops, whoever's holding the bowl has to answer a question. The question is always something light. Favorite meal? Funniest kitchen disaster? A memory from your mother's house? The bowl travels the room like a warm current, and by the time it returns to Carol, 8 women have said something personal out loud to strangers. It's all in the manual, page 11, spiral bound, filed between the coffee timing and the close. The questions are engineered, the answers are not. And that gap, real laughter from a rigged prompt, is what the whole afternoon runs on. Now, the demonstration proper begins. Carol holds up the 7-piece set, each piece nested inside the next. the whole stack the size of a modest wedding cake. She separates them with a kind of practiced tenderness, naming colours as she goes: marigold, sable, beetroot. She sets each one on the table like evidence. The plastic catches the lamplight in a way that Woolworth's Lustroware, which has the personality of a parking lot, simply does not. Then she does the seal. She presses the lid down, pushes one edge up with her thumb, and releases it. The bowl exhales. It's a small, soft and definitive sound, the kind of sound a thing makes when it means it. She passes the bowl to the woman on her left and says, "Your turn." The bowl goes around the room. Every woman presses. Every woman releases. 8 small exhales in 8 living rooms every week, from Florida to Oregon, all winter. The air has been inside that bowl for seconds. It feels significant anyway. Marjorie Hess, sitting 2 seats down from you, holds the bowl for an extra moment after the seal releases. She does it again. Then, once more. She bought 2 sets last year at a party in Helen's house, and still does this in her own kitchen when nobody's watching. She sets the bowl down with the careful authority of a woman who has found, in a pastel polyethylene container, something that works exactly as advertised. The smell in the room is coffee and starched cotton and the faint chemical newness of fresh plastic, clean in the way of things that are slightly too new to fully trust yet. You finish your coffee, someone refills it without asking. The order forms have not appeared yet, but they're in Carol's bag, arranged in a neat stack between the carbon paper and the receipt book. They've been there since Carol loaded the car this morning at 8:30. The afternoon has a shape. You can't see all of it yet, but you're already inside it. You're holding a plastic bowl while music plays, and when the music stops, whoever holds the bowl has to answer a question in front of the room. You pass it along a little faster than necessary. The demonstrator calls this an icebreaker, and everyone is laughing, and the laughing is real, which is the part you'll think about later. The game was designed in Florida, printed in a training manual, and rehearsed before this living room ever saw it. Spontaneous fun, scheduled for 2:15. You play 2 more rounds. The question you got was easy. Favourite vacation spot, and you said Cape Cod. And 3 other women said Cape Cod too, and now you have something in common with 3 women you've seen mostly through windshields. That's what the game actually does. Not warm you up to the product, warm you up to the room. By the time the order forms come out, you're not buying a container from a demonstrator. You're buying one in front of new friends. The distinction is load-bearing. Let's talk about the order form. It arrives at the end of the evening, after the coffee, after the seal demonstration, after the colour names have been recited like a very cheerful liturgy. Carol, the demonstrator, places one in front of each guest with the practiced casualness of someone who has placed approximately 400 order forms in front of approximately 400 guests and knows exactly how long people take to decide they want the Millionaire's Lime set. She refills your coffee without asking. The coffee has opinions about your hesitation. There's a number in the training manual for this too. Not a rule, exactly. A target. 8 to 12 guests, 3 to 5 orders per party, average ticket around $4. The 7-piece set is priced to sit comfortably between impulsive and I should think about this, which is exactly where Carol needs it to sit. She doesn't rush you. Rushing is Chapter 7. Chapter 7 is what you don't do. Meanwhile, the hostess, Dorothy, who invited you, who made the coffee cake, who vacuumed at 9 a meter, and hasn't sat down since, is keeping track in her head of how many orders are going in. She needs a certain number to unlock the better hostess gift. 1 free item comes with any party. A better free item requires 5 orders. The best free item requires 8. Dorothy knows this. Dorothy has known this since Carol first called. She hasn't said it out loud, because saying it out loud would be Chapter 7. A demonstrator named Ruth, working out of Columbus in 1956, keeps a notepad by her telephone with tally marks. 10 calls to confirm 8 guests. 8 guests to get 5 orders. 5 orders to make the party worth the gas, the setup, the 2-hour drive home at 10:15 at night, with a back seat full of returned containers and a carbon copy order pad on the passenger seat, like a very small, very optimistic filing cabinet. Ruth circles the numbers that come out right. Most weeks, 2 circles. Some weeks, 1. The games did their work an hour ago. The coffee has been doing its work all afternoon. The colour names turned a bowl into decor somewhere around the 2nd recitation, and Dorothy's crumb cake has made leaving without an order feel faintly rude since the front door opened. The whole afternoon is warm, unhurried, and quietly inevitable. None of it is an accident. All of it was tested in Kissimmee and revised and tested again, the way a pharmaceutical company tests a delivery mechanism. Not the drug, the delivery. The drug is the bowl. The delivery mechanism is an afternoon in Dorothy's living room. You fill out the form. Millionaire's Lime, the 7-piece set, and one of the tumblers in marigold because your daughter will like the colour. Carol writes it down without looking triumphant, which is also in the manual. You finish your coffee. Someone else is already talking about hosting the next one. You watch the demonstrator press the centre of a lid, lift one edge with her thumb, and produce a small sound the room has been waiting for. Then she hands the bowl to you, because you have to do it yourself. That's the method. Your first attempt fails. Your second attempt fails. On the third, the lid sighs under your hands, and the demonstrator congratulates you like you've passed a driving test. The bowl goes around the circle, and every woman burps it in turn. This is the entire reason the party exists, though nobody says so. The seal doesn't explain itself. That's the whole problem, the whole history, really. Earl Tupper modelled it on a paint can lid, which is a reasonable place to get an idea if you're a man who has spent significant time staring at paint cans. You press the centre down, you lift one edge with your thumb to release the vacuum. You feel the give. The problem is that none of this is visible from a department store shelf, where the bowl sits next to 12 other bowls and does not demonstrate itself. Customers picked it up, turned it over, put it back. Tupperware sat in Macy's and Marshall Field's and said nothing useful for years. By 1951, Tupper pulled it from every retail location in the country. The bowl had opinions about how it should be sold, and it turned out those opinions required a living room. Let's talk about what you're actually holding. The plastic is waxy smooth in a way that 1930s plastics weren't. Those were brittle, sticky, and faintly resentful things with the dignity of a coat hanger. This one is translucent. It glows slightly under the lamplight the way good ice does. The colour of yours is listed in the catalogue as Millionaire's Lime. This is not a colour that occurs in nature. The name does a lot of the work. The demonstrator explains that the seal is airtight. She explains this by filling the bowl with water, sealing it, and turning it upside down over Dorothy's good carpet. Dorothy's expression does not change. The bowl does not leak. This is the theatrical climax of the evening, the equivalent of a card trick where the card is your leftover pot roast and the magician drives a Ford and is home by 10. Now there's a whole room of women who can burp a bowl. This matters more than it sounds. You didn't just watch a demonstration, you performed one. Your hands did the thing. The seal yielded specifically to you. The training manuals, which demonstrators got in mimeograph packets, understood that a customer who has touched the product is a customer who has already half decided. Passing the bowl around wasn't generosity. It was the whole afternoon, working. A woman named Eleanor, she's been sitting near the window, burps the bowl and laughs. Her laugh is genuine. The bowl gets back to Carol. Someone asks whether it works with soup. It works with soup. Someone asks about the beetroot colour. The demonstrator produces a beetroot container from the display and the room has a small opinion about it. Sable is also available, which sounds serious. Marigold, which sounds like a cheerful commitment. The names land differently than red or yellow would. Red is a kitchen appliance. Marigold is a choice a person with taste would make. The containers were priced so that buying a full 7-piece set was a real decision on a single industrial wage. Not impossible. Not casual. The kind of purchase a woman thought about for a week, which is a longer sales cycle than a candy bar and requires a better argument than shelf presence. The argument was Eleanor laughing by the window and the water not going anywhere near Dorothy's carpet and the fact that you can do it yourself and you already did. The bowl makes its small sound again, on the other side of the circle. Everybody in this room will remember how to do this tomorrow. That's the product. The bowl is almost beside the point. You're handed an order form and a sharpened pencil while 7 women you see every week do the same. The prices are real money. The 7-piece set costs nearly $4, which is groceries, and you do the division in your head while keeping your face pleasant. Buying nothing is technically allowed, the way declining the collection plate at church is technically allowed. Dorothy gets credit toward her hostess gift based on what this room spends. Everyone knows it. You write down a starter set and tell yourself it's for the meatloaf. The hostess gift program is a precise piece of engineering. Dorothy has gathered 8 women in her living room, made the coffee, baked something with a crumb topping, and set out the good napkins. For this, she earns a single free item from a laminated sheet, the value of which depends entirely on how much you spend. The sheet has tiers. Dorothy knows the tiers. She set the date 3 weeks ago, made 10 phone calls to confirm 8 attendees, and vacuumed twice. She gets a millionaire's lime canister if the room clears $15. Dorothy has done the math before you arrived. The pencil, it's sharpened. Someone sharpened it deliberately before the party because a dull pencil gives you time to think. A sharpened pencil expects an answer. You hold it above the order form and consider the beetroot bowl set, and the pencil just waits there, patient, unhelpful, and already pointing at a line. Carol, who drives a two-tone Ford with sample cases in the trunk, watches the room with the calm attention of someone who has run this exact sequence 18 times this month. She doesn't hover. Hovering is for amateurs. She refills coffee, straightens the display, answers a question about the celery crisper in a tone that suggests the celery crisper will genuinely change things. You believe her. The celery crisper is $3.50 and it probably will. The social math in the room is running quietly behind the order forms. You know what Eleanor spent because Eleanor announced it. You know what Linda is considering because Linda is holding the pencil at the same angle you were 30 seconds ago. Nobody said out loud that you should spend what Eleanor spent. That would be crass. The room just already knows what Eleanor spent, and that number has a mild gravitational field. The icebreaker games earned their salary an hour ago, when Carol ran a round of Pass the Bowl while the music plays, which is basically musical chairs engineered to sell a salad bowl, charming, carefully staged, and designed to make you feel warmly toward an object you haven't yet purchased. You laughed. Everyone laughed. The bowl was passed so many times it started to feel like yours already. The training manual behind the game is 72 pages long. The fun is real. So is the 72 pages. And yet here is what Carol netted last Tuesday, $22. The week before, $31. She drove 40 minutes each way, made 9 booking calls to confirm Thursday's party, set up the display, ran the games, took the orders, processed the carbon copies at her kitchen table at 11 p.m, and will deliver the finished orders in 2 rounds next week, because the Hendersons live past the highway. The 1956 federal minimum wage is $1 an hour. It does not apply to Carol because Carol is classified as an independent contractor. The form has a line for that. The form has always had a line for that. Carol's starter kit cost her $7 when she signed up. She bought her own inventory, keeps it in the spare bedroom her daughter stopped using. Her car has done 14,000 miles this year, which the car is aware of and has opinions about. She is not an employee, she is a demonstrator. The distinction saves the company a very tidy sum that the company does not discuss at parties. You cap your pen and slide the order form toward the center of the table. You wrote down the celery crisper. You don't even eat a lot of celery, but Carol smiled when she held it up, and Dorothy's Tier 2 hostess gift requires $12 more, and you have known Dorothy since the Block Association in 1952. The meatloaf story you told yourself has quietly retired. The celery crisper is $3.50, and it is absolutely for Dorothy. You're putting on your coat when the demonstrator catches you at the door, order book still in hand, and asks whether you'd consider hosting a party of your own. She has dates available. She mentions the hostess gift, that crisper you were admiring, free. You hear yourself saying that the 3rd Thursday might work before you've fully decided anything. By the time you reach the sidewalk, you've committed your living room, your percolator, and 8 friendships you haven't consulted yet. The demonstrator writes your name in her book. The book always wins. You've agreed specifically to make 10 to 15 phone calls, not 1, not 3, 10 to 15, because 8 confirmed guests requires approximately that many conversations to produce. Some women are busy. Some are interested but need to be asked twice. One will say yes, and then not show. The phone sits on the kitchen wall and you work through the list in the evenings, after dinner, before the children are in bed, sometimes during. Nobody calls this labor. It's just called planning. The hostess gift program is precise about what you earn for all of this. 1 item, free. The crisper you were admiring. If enough people come and enough orders are placed, which is to say the crisper is not exactly free, it's contingent on a minimum sales threshold that the demonstrator will explain to you later, warmly, when she calls to confirm the date. The crisper knows this. It sits in the catalogue, small, pastel, and professionally innocent. Your living room needs to be arranged. Chairs pulled into a rough circle, the The coffee table cleared, the good cups set out. You make a coffee cake the morning of, because nobody said to and everyone expects it. Your percolator, which has a small opinion about large crowds, will be asked to perform twice. You've also been asked, gently, to think about which of your friends might genuinely be interested in hosting their own party, a detail that seemed conversational when it was mentioned and is now sitting in the back of your mind like an unpaid bill. Patricia, your neighbour from across the street, arrives first and helps you arrange the napkins. She does this with the focus of someone diffusing something. She doesn't know yet that she's about to sit through a 2-hour demonstration, buy a set of mixing bowls, and leave having tentatively agreed to host a party in October. Nobody knows that part yet. That's the architecture of the evening. The demonstrator arrives with her case and sets up in 15 minutes flat. She's done this enough times that the layout is the same regardless of whose living room it is. Containers along the coffee table in a specific order, largest to smallest, pastels catching the lamplight the same way they always do. Millionaire's lime next to marigold next to sable. She doesn't set up the beetroot crisper in your sightline by accident. The icebreaker game starts before anyone has fully settled. Music on, Tupperware bowl, passed hand to hand around the circle. When the music stops, whoever's holding it answers a question. The questions are in the training manual. The answers are not, but the laughter is reliable, and the laughter is the point. By the time the demonstration proper begins, everyone in the room has touched a piece of Tupperware, said something personal out loud, and laughed at least once. This is not a coincidence. It's closer to a very cheerful operational procedure. You'll spend the next few days on follow-up, checking the order forms against your notes, making sure Patricia got the right lid size. Calling one woman who said she might add something and then didn't confirm. Carol, your demonstrator, will collect the orders and handle delivery, but the coordination of 8 different women's preferences runs through you. You are the node. The hostess gift does not reflect this. By Thursday evening, after the guests go home and the cups are washed and the coffee cake is mostly gone, you'll sit at the kitchen table and realize you enjoyed it. That part is also true. The room was warm, the lamplight was good, and for 2 hours you were the center of something that ran smoothly and made people laugh. The crisper is in the cabinet. It fits perfectly. You've already started thinking about who to invite in October. You spend the entire Wednesday before your party cleaning a house that was already clean. Different rules apply when the women coming over are the same ones who'll discuss your baseboards on the walk home. You wax the kitchen floor. You move the good ashtrays into the living room. You bake the coffee cake from the recipe the demonstrator left, because the recipe is part of the script, and you iron the tablecloth your mother gave you. None of these hours appear anywhere in anyone's accounting. They're just what Thursday costs. The demonstrator arrives before everyone else. It's Carol, and she carries a case the size of a small suitcase that opens into a display stand. She does this with the practiced calm of a woman who has opened this case in 47 living rooms and intends to open it in 47 more. The containers come out in order. Millionaire's lime first, then marigold, then a low sable bowl that catches the lamplight and holds it. She places them on your mother's tablecloth like she's curating a small museum. The tablecloth, for the record, was not consulted about this. The room has a smell by now. It's percolated coffee, which started 40 minutes ago, so it's past its best but still warm. It's your good soap in the bathroom, which you swapped in specifically this morning. It's the faint chemical newness of the polyethylene, clean but slightly present, the way a new shower curtain announces itself for a week. It's Chanel No. 5 from Vera, who arrives first and always wears too much, and underneath that, laundry starch and cigarette smoke and something that might be the coffee cake starting to brown. The room smells like effort. It smells organized. It smells like a house performing its best version of itself for an audience that includes women who have seen your actual version. 8 women settle onto your good chairs and the folding chairs your husband carried up from the basement without being asked. Carol opens with a game. Music from the little transistor on the bookshelf, a Tupperware bowl passed hand to hand, and when the music stops, whoever's holding it has to answer a question. What's one thing in your kitchen that drives you absolutely crazy? Vera says her icebox door. Someone says shallow shelves. She has a 1950 Frigidaire with 8 cubic feet of interior space, which is roughly the size of an optimistic filing cabinet. The answers are real. The frustration is real. Carol writes nothing down because she doesn't need to. The game already told her what to sell. Now the bowl starts its work. Carol takes it back, presses the lid down with her palm, then releases one edge with her thumb. The seal yields with a soft, deliberate exhale, not a snap, not a click, but an actual small sigh of displaced air. She passes it to the woman on her left. She passes it to the next. By the time it reaches the back row, 3 women have figured out the gesture and 2 haven't, and Carol lets them try again, patient and unhurried, because the product only works if you hold it, and you only want it after you've held it. Nobody in a department store ever got this far. The Woolworths container across town sits on a shelf waiting to be understood. It will wait a long time. The order forms come out after the coffee cake is cut. Carbon paper underneath. Carol recites the colour names with the cadence of someone reading a dessert menu. Marigold, sable, beetroot, millionaire's lime. The names are doing something. They're not primary red and industrial green. They're tasteful, specific, and quietly aspirational. Beetroot sounds like something you'd serve at a dinner party where the guests have opinions about wine. You order the 7-piece set, which costs real money on a single household wage. You think about your kitchen cabinet. You think about the Frigidaire. You write your name at the top of the form in your good handwriting. And Carol writes your name on a different form, the one that says you've agreed to host. The hostess gift is waiting at the threshold of 8 confirmed attendees and a minimum order total. 1 item, your choice, from a specified tier. It's a canister. It's a nice canister. You ironed a tablecloth for a canister, and somewhere under the lamplight and the coffee smell, you know this, and you don't entirely mind. You total it up after your party ends. You provided the living room, the coffee, the cake, the invitations, the telephone calls, the cleaning, and 8 guests assembled from your personal goodwill. The company provided 1 free crisper. Your guests spent $11, and somewhere a percentage of that travelled upward through people you've never met. You put the crisper in the refrigerator and stand there a moment looking at it. It's a nice crisper. The math hangs around anyway, doing quiet arithmetic in the back of your mind. The hostess gift program works on a sliding scale. 5 guests earns you 1 item. 8 guests earns you a slightly larger item. 12 guests and you're looking at something with a lid. The scale tops out well before it becomes embarrassing for the company, which is considerate of it. You invited these women. You know their schedules, their husbands' moods, which ones will stay too late, which ones will buy nothing and apologize charmingly on the way out. That knowledge has a market value the crisper does not reflect. The coffee. You made a full percolator, not the small one, because you didn't know exactly who would come, and running out is socially catastrophic in a way that having too much simply isn't. You also made the coffee cake from scratch because the boxed version sits differently in the mind of a neighbour who is already there to judge your kitchen. The coffee and the cake cost you somewhere around 40 cents. The crisper retails for $1.25. By one measure, this is a profit. By another measure, you clean the bathroom for $1.25. Margaret, from 2 streets over, arrives before the others and stands in your kitchen asking questions about your curtains while you pour cream into a small ceramic pitcher you got as a wedding gift. She bought a 4-piece set tonight. She spent $4.75. The demonstrator's commission on that purchase is Carol's problem and Carol's reward, and the percentage above Carol belongs to Carol's manager, and the percentage above that belongs to someone in Florida whose name you've never heard. Margaret admires the picture. You tell her where you got it. She nods with the kind of interest that means she's already moved on. The hostess gift program has a name that makes it sound more elaborate than it is. It's called a program because 1 item per party sounds thin, and program sounds like a decision was made on your behalf, which is comforting in the same way that independent contractor sounds like freedom. You don't think about this at the time. You think about whether the marigold crisper will show grease, and whether the beetroot set your neighbour Beverly ordered will look good in Beverly's kitchen, and whether it's too late to call Beverly to ask if she wants millionaire's lime instead. It's 10:45. It is too late to call Beverly. The order forms are still on the table. 3 of them have carbon copies and 1 of them smudged, which means you'll need to copy it by hand before Carol comes back Thursday to collect. The kitchen table is covered in paper. You gather the cups, find a lipstick print on the good china, decide not to care, and put the cake under the dome lid. The Frigidaire hums. It holds less than it sounds like it should. The crisper takes up a notable portion of the vegetable shelf. And yet the crisper is yours, in your name. Not listed under your husband's name on a store account, not purchased with an allowance, not borrowed or shared. It arrived in your home because of a thing you organized, a network you maintained, and a Thursday evening you managed start to finish. The 8 women in your living room came because you asked, and they came because when you ask, people come. That's not nothing. The crisper knows this. It sits on the vegetable shelf, radiating a calm, translucent, and thoroughly earned satisfaction, as though it too has done the math and is at peace with the outcome. You're washing cups after the guests leave when the demonstrator, drying dishes beside you without being asked, mentions that you'd be good at this. She watched you work the room, she says. You knew everyone's name. You kept the conversation moving. You sold 2 bowls without trying. The company is looking for women exactly like you, and the money is real, and you could fit it around the children's school hours. You laugh it off. She leaves a brochure on the counter anyway, next to the dish rack, where you'll see it tomorrow. The brochure is pink, not aggressively pink, a considered pink, the pink of something that has thought about what it wants from you. Inside, a woman in a shirtwaist dress holds a pastel bowl with the composure of someone who has solved a problem you didn't know you had. The copy describes flexible hours, your own business, the satisfaction of helping your neighbours. It does not mention the starter kit fee of $7, which is yours to pay before you've sold a single thing. The $7 covers a sample kit, a few containers, a demonstrator guide, some order forms on carbon paper. What it doesn't cover: your phone calls, your gasoline, the cake you'll bring to your first party because arriving empty-handed has never once worked for anyone. The kit is the entry fee. Everything after it is yours to manage. The company's financial exposure to your success is, at this point, exactly 0. The demonstrator who left you that brochure earns a commission on your sales once you sign, 5 to 8%, flowing upward through people you'll never meet, which is basically the LinkedIn hustle influencer economy, except everyone involved has a percolator and a genuine opinion about icebox containers. She isn't recruiting you out of malice. She is recruiting you because the structure rewards it more than selling another 7-piece set herself. She also, separately and genuinely, likes you. She dries the last cup, sets it in the rack, and lets herself out. A neighbour 2 streets over, Joyce, signed her papers in March. By April, she's working 3 parties a week. The math on paper says $40. The math in practice, once you subtract the gas to Deborah's house and back, the carbon paper for the order forms, the 45 minutes on the phone confirming 8 people who were definitely coming until 3 of them weren't, the math in practice says something quieter. Joyce doesn't say the number out loud. She says she loves the flexibility. And here's the thing about the flexibility. It's real. Joyce's manager at the dress shop would not let her leave at 2:15 for the school pickup. Tupperware will. Joyce books her own parties, sets her own nights, works the hours the children allow. In 1956, this is not nothing. In 1956, this is, for a married woman with no degree and no credit in her own name, fairly close to everything. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act is 18 years away. Joyce's income doesn't go through her husband's account. It goes into a tin in the back of the kitchen drawer, and the tin has a lock, and Joyce has the key. You pick up the brochure again on Tuesday, after the dishes are done and the children are in school. The woman in the shirtwaist dress is still holding the bowl. Still composed, still waiting. You read the income section twice. The numbers are possible. Not large, but possible. And possible is a different category than what the rest of Tuesday morning contains. The demonstrator calls Wednesday to follow up. She asks if you have questions. You say you might, someday, think about it. She says there's no pressure. She calls the following Wednesday too. The brochure stays on the counter. It has staked a position, pink, patient, and lightly perfumed, and it intends to hold it. You bring it up with your husband on a Sunday after dinner, when his mood is most predictable. You present it carefully, not a job, exactly, a little something with the neighbourhood ladies, a few hours a week, pin money. You've rehearsed this framing all afternoon, because the word job lands differently in this house. A wife who works means a husband who can't provide, and everyone on this street can recite that equation. He reads the brochure. He asks what it pays. You don't actually know yet. He says it's fine, as long as dinner's on time. The brochure doesn't use the word salary, it uses earnings potential, which is a different genre of promise. It also doesn't mention the 10 to 15 phone calls you'll make per party just to confirm 8 attendees. or the fact that your car is now a delivery vehicle, or that Tuesday night's order forms will be spread across the kitchen table at 11 p.m. while your husband sleeps. The brochure has excellent photography though. The pastel containers glow like something from a better decade. You call the demonstrator who gave you her card at the party. It's Carol, who picks up on the second ring with a brightness that suggests she was expecting you, or someone exactly like you. Carol says she'll walk you through everything. She says this in the tone of someone who has walked 11 people through everything in the last 3 months. She drives over on a Wednesday while your kids are at school, sits at your kitchen table, and opens a folder. The folder has a printed order form on top, a carbon copy underneath, and a list of names with check marks next to 9 of them. She sets this down in front of you, neat, complete, and faintly ceremonial, like a field surgeon presenting instruments. The starter kit is $7. In 1954, that's about 2 tanks of gas, or a dress on clearance at Sears, or a week of school lunches. The company calls it an investment in your business. Carol calls it practically nothing. It is not nothing. You sign anyway. Now you are a demonstrator, not an employee. This distinction will never be explained to you directly, but it has been thought about very carefully by people in offices you'll never see. As a demonstrator, you don't get a salary, benefits, sick days, or coverage under the Fair Labor Standards Act. You also don't get a manager, a schedule, or anyone telling you what to do, which is framed as freedom. The freedom is real. So is the rest of it. Your first booking call takes 22 minutes and produces one maybe. The second call is shorter because the line is busy. The third call produces a yes and a question about whether you could come on a Thursday, not a Friday. Because Friday is Joan's mother's bridge night, and nobody will come if Joan doesn't come. You write this down. You are learning that booking a party is less like scheduling a meeting and more like solving a logic puzzle involving the social calendars of 12 women who don't know they're being scheduled around each other. The phone is attached to the wall. It has a cord that reaches about 4 feet in any direction, which means you make all 15 of these calls standing in approximately one spot in the kitchen, which is also where you're making dinner, which means the carbon paper is on the counter next to the potatoes. This is the invisible part, the part that doesn't appear in the brochure with the excellent photography. You confirm your first party for the following Thursday. 8 women, 7:30, Dorothy Kellner's living room on Maple, the one with the good sofa. Dorothy gets a free item from the hostess gift program in exchange for her living room, her percolated coffee, and the social gravitational force of her personal relationships. Dorothy is, functionally, your venue, your marketing, and your catering department. Dorothy gets a salad bowl in Millionaire's Lime. It has a lid that burps. He asks at dinner how the phone calls went. You say fine. He says good, as long as dinner's on time. Dinner was on time. It is always on time. That part was never actually in question. You write a check for $7 to become a Tupperware demonstrator, which is the first time you've paid money to get a job. The starter kit arrives in a case like a salesman's sample bag. Bowls, tumblers, the canisters, order forms, and a training manual thick enough to mean business. You are now, according to the paperwork, an independent contractor. You read that phrase twice. It sounds like freedom. You'll learn what else it means later, the way everyone learns what fine print means. Afterward, the training manual doesn't mention wages. It mentions earnings potential. Those are different things, and the manual knows the difference, even if you don't yet. You'll study the rest of it later, at this same table, after a different set of dishes. For now, it sits on top of the starter kit, heavy, confident, and patient. It can wait. It knows you've already paid. The setup starts early. You arrive at Dorothy Kellner's house 45 minutes before the guests. Your car holds the case, 2 bags of product, and your notebook. Dorothy holds the door and looks at the bags with an expression that is partly welcoming and partly the face of someone who has agreed to something and is only now doing the math. You arrange the containers on her coffee table the way the manual shows, staggered by size, lids off, colours grouped. Millionaire's Lime next to sable, marigold near the edge where the lamplight catches it. Under a living room lamp, the pastel polyethylene glows faintly, the way sea glass glows when you hold it to a window. You step back. It looks like a small, tidy and very organised celebration. The burp-seal is your opening act. You've practiced it until the motion is automatic. Press the centre of the lid down, thumb the edge up, release. The air escapes with a soft, decisive sound. Not a pop, more like a sigh. A contented sigh, which is a strange thing for a piece of plastic to express. But there it is. You pass the bowl to the nearest guest. She does it. She laughs. You pass it again. The laughter travels around the room before the sales pitch does. This is the whole theory. The manual calls it demonstration. It's also, in a quieter way, permission. You've just let 8 women practice a small, satisfying thing, and now they feel slightly affiliated with the product, the way you feel affiliated with a restaurant after they let you taste the soup. A woman named Patrice Howell gets the bowl when the music stops and has to say her biggest kitchen problem. She says her refrigerator. She means the Frigidaire in her kitchen, which she is apparently running like a hostage negotiation, constantly rearranging, stacking, hoping nothing tips. The room nods. Everyone has this refrigerator. Everyone has this problem. You have this problem. You hold up the canister. The part the manual doesn't cover is what happens at 11 o'clock, after the guests leave and Dorothy collects the cash and checks and thanks you with a warmth that is entirely genuine. You sit at your own kitchen table with the order forms and the carbon paper. 3 hours ago you were pouring coffee. Now you're doing bookkeeping, alone, under a lamp. The orders have to be tallied, called in, and then, when the shipment arrives in 2 weeks, delivered by you, in your car, to each address on the list. You also need to call 4 women about next Thursday's party. It's 11:15. You'll call them tomorrow morning. Tonight you write the addresses in a column and add up the totals and find that after product costs and the gas you burned driving to Dorothy's and back, you've cleared about $9 for the evening. $9 for the party, the setup, the performance, the coffee, the carbon paper, and the 11 o'clock accounting session. The math sits on the table. It doesn't comment. It just sits there. You study the training manual at the kitchen table after the children are in bed, the way you once studied for exams. There's a script for the party, word for word. A script for the games. A script for handling the woman who says she can't afford it, and a different script for the woman who says she needs to ask her husband. You practice the burping demonstration on your own bowls until your thumb finds the edge without looking. The manual was written in Kissimmee, Florida, by people who've thought hard about your living room. The objection scripts are the most interesting part. They come in 2 columns. Left column, what she says. Right column, what you say back. The woman who can't afford it gets a gentle reframe about cost per use and food waste. The woman who needs to ask her husband gets a smile and a suggestion about how to phrase it. There are 7 objections in the manual. The 8th, that she just doesn't want any, isn't listed. Presumably that one doesn't come up. The games don't feel like sales training, they feel like a party. Music plays. A bowl gets passed around the circle. The music stops, and whoever is holding the bowl has to answer a question. The question is always warm. The question is always about the kitchen. The question is never, how much do you currently spend on food storage? But the bowl is in your hands, and the bowl has your attention, and your attention is now pointed directly at the problem the bowl solves. The training manual calls this engagement. You could call it other things. The manual doesn't. A woman named Lois Polk, 2 weeks into her demonstrator career, practices the opening sequence in her bathroom mirror every morning before her husband wakes up. She does this with a celery green canister. The canister, glossy, patient and unmoved, does not applaud. Lois does the sequence anyway. She gets the burp on the first try. She moves on to the objection column. The script handles price with a specific technique. You divide the retail cost across meals. A 7-piece set becomes, mathematically, a few pennies per use. The math is optimistic. It assumes the containers are used daily, which they will be, because you sold them, and the woman you sold them to is going to use them to justify the purchase every single morning until the set is paid off in her mind. The containers are patient. They will wait. Of course, the script also covers recruitment, not as sales, as opportunity. There's a whole section on how to mention the demonstrator program naturally, casually, during the delivery round, when you're back at her door with her order and she's already happy, already holding a container she likes. The manual suggests a phrase about sharing what you love. The phrase is 3 sentences long and lands. If done correctly, like a thought you came to on your own, someone in Kissimmee spent real, billable time making it sound that way. Selling containers earns you a commission on each sale. Recruiting a new demonstrator earns you a percentage of everything she sells, forever or until she quits. Managers above you earn a percentage of what your recruits sell. Then distributors above them earn a percentage of that. The structure is tall. You are near the bottom. The manual doesn't explain the structure this way. The manual explains it as a team. The training materials also include motivational content, not history, not product specs, motivational content. Brownie Wise appears in several sections, usually photographed at an angle that suggests she has just finished saying something important. The quotes are underlined in your copy because the previous owner underlined them. If we build the people, they'll build the business. You read it. You underline it again. You have now underlined it twice and earned the same amount. You close the manual around 11. The kitchen table is still covered in order forms from last Thursday. The manual's spine has already cracked at the objections chapter, which says something about somebody. You know the objection script well enough now that you can run it in your head without the manual. The woman who needs to ask her husband. The smile. The suggested phrasing. You have it. You turn off the kitchen light. The pastel containers on the counter glow faintly from the streetlight coming through the window. Millionaire's lime. Beetroot. Sable. The colours have names that sound like someone's idea of abundance. You're starting to think that was the point. You book your first party by telephone, standing in the hallway where the phone is mounted, working through a list of names. It takes 10 calls to get one yes. Then you call the yes back to confirm a date, then you call her again the week before, then you call the guest she's invited, because attendance is your problem now, not hers. 15 calls to put 8 women in a room. Your husband asks who you keep talking to. The phone bill is yours too, by the way. The contract mentioned that. The party itself runs 2 to 3 hours. You arrive early to set up, containers arranged by size, the colour progression deliberate, millionaire's lime next to marigold, sable anchoring one end like a responsible adult at a dinner party. You've driven your own car to get here. The gas is yours. The car is yours. The depreciation is a concept you're choosing not to think about right now. The guests go home around 9. You pack everything back into the carrying case, say goodbye to the hostess, thank her for the coffee and the use of her living room, and the 5 friends she supplied entirely free of charge. Then you drive home with 12 orders on the passenger seat, 3 of which have handwriting you can't fully read, and 1 woman circled beetroot without specifying a size. Tomorrow, that's another phone call. Everything in this business is eventually another phone call. The order forms don't call you back, you do. A 3-party week is 20 to 30 hours. That's the math. Booking calls, confirmation calls, driving to the party, set up the party, tear down, driving home, processing orders, placing the wholesale order with your distributor, waiting for the shipment, then doing your own delivery rounds because the product doesn't teleport to the customer. It arrives at your door first. You sort it, you bag it, you drive it out in batches, hoping Lorraine is home and hasn't changed her mind about the marigold canister set. A demonstrator named Irene Caswell, working out of Akron, keeps a small notebook next to the phone where she marks every call with a tick. 1 tick means she reached someone. 2 ticks means she got a commitment. She has been doing this for 14 months. The notebook has 4 pages of ticks. She doesn't count them. She caps the pen, sets it on top of the notebook, and picks up the handset again. Of course, the company isn't paying for any of this. The company does not experience the phone bill. It does not experience the late-night carbon paper or the redelivery run to Lorraine's house on a Wednesday morning. The company experiences revenue. You experience Tuesday. The hostess, for her part, gets 1 free item from the hostess gift program. 1 item in exchange for her living room, her percolator, her coffee cake, and 8 women who trusted her enough to come. She picks from a printed sheet. The sheet has about a dozen options. She circles the celery keeper. It's a nice celery keeper, small, translucent, and sincere. The celery keeper does not cover the cost of the chock-full o' nuts she put out, but it is translucent, and it seals with a satisfying burp, and in 1956 that is not nothing. You set up tonight's demonstration in the home of a woman you barely know, arranging bowls on her coffee table while her guests watch you with arms folded, friendly but evaluating. You're the entertainment, the merchant, and the neighbour all at once, and the proportions have to stay exactly right or the room goes cold. You launch the first game. Your voice does something bright and unfamiliar. Somewhere in the 2nd hour, a woman in a green dress burps a bowl, laughs out loud, and the room turns. You start writing orders. The games aren't accidents. Your training manual has 3 of them. with suggested pacing and a note about when to introduce the product. The first one involves music. Someone puts a record on, you pass a bowl around the room, and when the needle lifts, whoever's holding it has to answer a question. The question is about leftovers. It's always about leftovers. You're not playing a game. You're conducting a very gentle investigation into how much food this household throws away per week, and then you're going to solve the problem you just mapped. The needle lifts. Somebody laughs at her own answer. You reach for the order pad. The bowl itself is a Wonderlier, Millionaire's Lime, which is not lime-coloured so much as it is lime-adjacent, a colour that suggests freshness without committing to it. Under the standing lamp in someone's living room, the polyethylene has a soft glow that department store lighting never produced. There's a warmth to it. That's not an accident either. Tupper chose the pastel palette with the same deliberateness he applied to everything, which was considerable. The bowl is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It glows, calm, pastel, and quietly persuasive. People want to hold it. A woman named Dottie Ferris, sitting nearest the window, reaches out and takes the bowl without being asked. She turns it over. She doesn't know yet about the seal. This is the moment. You take it back gently, press the lid down with your palm, then lift one edge with your thumb and release. The air escapes with a soft, decisive sound. Not loud, not rude, just unmistakably satisfied. You pass it to Dottie. She does it. She makes the sound. She does it again. 3 other women lean forward simultaneously. Nobody does this with a Lustroware container at Woolworths, because nobody at Woolworths has a Dottie, a lamp, or a game. The seal was modelled on a paint can lid, which is either the most boring design origin story imaginable or a stroke of practical genius, depending on how much you enjoy the sound it makes. Tupper filed the patent in 1947. The seal works exactly the way his notebook said it would. He was right about the product. He was also wrong about the store. A bowl sitting on a shelf cannot demonstrate itself. It just sits there, slightly waxy, communicating nothing, which is how Tupperware ended up back in living rooms. Because the living room has you in it, and you have a voice. And the voice is currently explaining airtight food preservation to 8 women who came over for coffee cake. The coffee, for the record, is still warm. Your host, her name is Connie, and she has been up since 6, has refilled the percolator twice. She gets 1 free bowl for this. 1. The Wonderlier Junior, which holds about a cup and a half. Connie accepted this with a smile and what looks like genuine enthusiasm. You understand it. You accepted the same arrangement yourself, from 1 chair over. Somewhere past the 2nd hour, the orders are real. 4 sets. 1 woman wants the full 7-piece. You write it down on the carbon form, press hard so the copy takes. The woman in the green dress, Arlene, from 2 streets over, is already asking how she could host one herself. You give her the answer Brownie Wise's manuals gave you. Your voice is steady. The lamp is warm. The bowl is glowing on the coffee table like it was always going to end up there. You load the back seat of the family Ford with cardboard boxes on a Tuesday morning because the orders from your last 3 parties have arrived and every one of them has to be delivered by hand. Mrs. Albright's canister set. Mrs. Pruitt's tumblers in marigold. The company doesn't deliver to customers. The company delivers to you. And the last mile is your problem, your gasoline, your afternoon. You plan a route across the neighbourhood like a milkman. 3 of the stops will want to chat. You budget an hour for each. The route isn't complicated, it's just long. You've got 11 deliveries across 4 streets, and 2 of them require circling back because Mrs. Holloway is only home after 2. You have a handwritten schedule on an index card tucked into your sun visor, which is basically a dispatch system for 1 person with a station wagon and no dispatcher. The Ford's back seat smells faintly of polyethylene and slightly of your Tuesday, which is a specific and not entirely pleasant combination. Mrs. Kowalski on Elm opens the door before you've knocked, because she saw the car from her kitchen window, and she has questions. Not complaints. Questions. The Wonder Bowl, she ordered. Can it go in boiling water? You explain, for the 3rd time this week, that it cannot. She nods as if this is new information. She offers you coffee. You accept because refusing takes longer than drinking it, and you've learned this the hard way. A calico cat named Gerald, broad, dignified, and unimpressed, sits on the counter and regards the Tupperware box with the deep suspicion of an animal who has seen trends come and go. The coffee stops accumulate by Mrs. Pruitt's house. You're running 40 minutes behind and carrying a small piece of coffee cake wrapped in a paper napkin that you didn't ask for but couldn't decline. Mrs. Pruitt needs the marigold tumblers confirmed against the order form because she thought she ordered 4 and the box has 6. She ordered 6. The carbon copy says 6. The carbon copy is diplomatically correct. 3 parties last week. 22 hours between booking calls, set up, the parties themselves, tear down, order processing, and now this. The deliveries alone run 4 hours, including the coffee situations. What you net depends on what didn't sell and what came out of your kit discount. The math produces a number that the math does not care to explain. You don't think about it in those terms, mostly. You think about it in terms of Mrs. Halloran on Birch, who mentions, quietly, while signing for her tumblers, that she bought a coat last month. Her own money, her own coat. She says it the way people say things they've been holding for a while. The coat is not the point. The coat is very much the point. Of course the car isn't reimbursed. The gas isn't reimbursed. The phone calls you made to confirm these orders, your dime, your rotary dial, aren't reimbursed either. You are an independent contractor, which is a legal classification meaning the company's very healthy annual sales don't technically involve employees in your zip code. You are, in the company's accounting, a small business owner who happens to be delivering marigold tumblers in someone else's neighborhood on a Tuesday afternoon with a piece of unwanted coffee cake on the passenger seat. By 3 o'clock, the back seat is empty and your index card is fully crossed off. You pull into your own driveway and sit for a moment with the engine off. The Ford ticks as it cools. Gerald, or some neighborhood equivalent of Gerald, watches from a fence post. Tonight you'll start the booking calls for next week's parties, because Arlene asked about hosting, and Arlene's living room seats 10 comfortably, and 10 seats is a good party. The forms are already stacked by the phone. The Ford has been the warehouse, the delivery fleet, and the logistics department since the day you signed. It also has a sun visor and a radio that gets 2 stations. You spread the order forms across the kitchen table at 11 at night, after the party, after the drive home, after checking on the children. Every order gets copied in triplicate, 1 for the customer, 1 for the distributor, 1 for your records, and the carbon paper smudges if your hand drags. You add the columns twice because a mistake comes out of your margin, not the company's. The house is silent except for the percolator clock. This part of the job has no audience and no applause. It's just you and arithmetic. The forms themselves have opinions. The carbon paper wants to shift exactly 1 centimeter to the left while you're pressing down, so the third copy reads like a telegram received during an earthquake. You hold it flat with one palm and write with the other. Your handwriting gets smaller as the night gets longer. By the third order form, it's practically a secret language only you and a moderately attentive distributor can read. The math, then. You ran 3 parties this week. 22 hours from first booking call to final delivery. Your gross for the week is somewhere between $32 and $40, depending on whether Janet's order for the Wonder Bowl set is actually a confirmed sale or a very enthusiastic maybe. You subtract the starter inventory you restocked. You subtract the gas. You subtract the 2 rolls of carbon paper, the order envelopes, and the long-distance call to confirm the Lakeshore distributor's address. What's left fits in one hand. The federal minimum wage became $1 an hour in 1956. Your effective rate is somewhere below that. This is not technically illegal because you are not technically an employee. You are an independent businesswoman, which is what the training manual calls you on page 1, in a font slightly larger than the rest of the text, as if the size of the font settles the question. Meanwhile, the company is doing $25 million a year. Your cut of it fits in the envelope behind the bread box in 1s and 5s. Somewhere in Kissimmee, at the company campus called, without irony, Tupperware headquarters and home, there are people whose job titles involve the word director. They don't fold carbon paper at 11 p.m. They take a percentage of what you produce and call it an override. You call it gravity. You are the ground. A demonstrator named Elaine, calm, precise, and faintly theatrical, with a way of holding her pen like she's signing a treaty, told you she once calculated her hourly rate on a slow week and then tore the paper up without showing anyone. Smart woman Elaine. And yet the job does one thing nobody warned you about. The money is real. Small? Yes. Unreliable? Yes. Below the threshold of a law that doesn't cover you anyway. But it's yours. Your name on the deposit slip. Your signature on the bank account. In 1957, A married woman trying to open a line of credit in her own name is referred to her husband as a matter of policy. A checking account is not credit. A checking account you can manage. And $35 a week, accumulated over 6 months, is a car payment, or a semester of tuition, or a winter coat nobody else picked out, hanging in the closet with the receipt still in your purse. You knew all this before your first party, before the starter kit, before you spread the training materials across this same table at a different 11 p.m. You did the math then too. You decided it was worth it. Most weeks you still think so. You cap the pen, you stack the forms. The top copy goes in the envelope for the distributor. The second copy goes to the customer with the order, and the third copy goes into the folder you keep in the drawer under the good silverware. Your records, your evidence. The carbon smudge on your right palm takes 2 passes with a dish towel to shift, and even then it's more a redistribution than a removal. Arlene's party is Thursday. You make $28 one week, and it feels like a triumph until you do something dangerous, which is count the hours. The calls, the driving, the setup, the parties themselves, the paperwork, the deliveries, 30 hours, give or take. You work it out on the back of an order form. Less than $1 an hour. The new federal minimum wage is $1 an hour. You check the math again, get the same answer, and put the order form in the drawer. There's a party to book for Thursday. The phone calls come first in any honest accounting. Not the party itself, the phone calls that make the party possible. 10 to 15 calls to confirm 8 attendees. That's not a typo. You call a woman named Patrice twice because she said maybe the first time, which in 1956 suburban parlance means she'll come if nothing better happens, and nothing better is allowed to happen. You call Sandra because Sandra knows Norma, and Norma has a living room and a flexible Wednesday. Each call is 7 minutes. The math on that alone is almost 2 hours before you've left the house, set up a table, or opened a single container. The hours themselves are slippery, which is the quiet genius of the arrangement. The drive to a party is 20 minutes each way, but it doesn't count, because it's just driving. The setup is 45 minutes, but it doesn't count, because Arlene is telling you about her sister the whole time. The party runs 3 hours, but there's coffee cake involved. So, the tear-down, the goodbyes, the second goodbyes at the door, the drive home with the case rattling on the back seat, none of it clocks in, and none of it clocks out. Missus. Kowalski's coffee counts for nothing either, and you've had 4 cups of it this week, each one 40 minutes long. The cake plate you keep returning and getting handed back is on its 4th lap of the neighborhood. The only timesheet is the back of an order form, in pencil, in a drawer. You are the only auditor who has ever seen it. Your husband's work has edges. He leaves at 7:40. He comes home at 5:15. In between, a paycheck accumulates with his name typed on it, and on Friday it arrives, signed, itemized, and official. Your work has no edges at all. It starts when Patrice calls back during breakfast and ends somewhere past the 11 o'clock carbon paper, and your pay arrives as cash and checks in an envelope you sort at the kitchen table with the radio off. 2 of this week's checks are post-dated. One is from Patrice, who apologized for it twice and then asked about the marigold tumblers. He gets a pay stub. You get arithmetic. The minimum wage is new, by the way. 1956, $1 an hour, federally guaranteed. The newspapers are proud of it. It applies to employees. You've read your agreement twice. You are not one. So the number lives in the drawer with the order forms, patient, exact, and politely ignored. Helen says the women who succeed are the ones who don't dwell on slow weeks, and Helen says this while transferring your party total into her leather date book, where the same number looks somehow healthier. You're not bitter about this. You're mostly not bitter about this. Mostly you're booked through the 3rd week of next month, and Arlene's living room seats 10, and 10 seats is a good party. You did that multiplication during the rinse cycle, without a pencil, the way you do most of the math now. Standing at the sink, watching the water run clear. The order form in the drawer stays where it is. You know what it says. It knows what it says. You leave each other alone. You ask your manager a simple question. What happens if you get sick? And the answer arrives wrapped in cheerfulness. Nothing happens. There's no sick pay because you're not an employee. No pension, no health insurance, no unemployment if it all ends tomorrow. You're a businesswoman, she says, and businesswomen provide for themselves. The inventory in your hall closet is yours whether it sells or not. The risks all flow downhill to you, and the percentages all flow uphill away from you. You file this information where you file everything now, behind the next party. On paper, independent contractor means the company doesn't owe you a W-2. It doesn't owe you a shift. It doesn't owe you anything legally that it hasn't already handed you in the form of a starter kit you paid for yourself. The Fair Labor Standards Act has a minimum wage floor. The floor has a hole in it shaped exactly like you. Your manager is named Helen, and she says all of this with the warmth of someone offering you a second slice of coffee cake. She adjusts the strap of her purse, smiles at a point just past your left shoulder, and adds that the women who succeed here are the ones who think of it as their own business. Helen has said this 11 times today. She believes it. This is the part that's hard to explain to anyone later. You sell, and you earn a commission. Helen writes your weekly total in her leather datebook and collects 5 to 8% of it. Her distributor collects an override above that. Nobody above you is in a living room at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday asking a near stranger if she wants the marigold set or the millionaire's lime. The further up you go, the less selling anyone does. The more recruiting, though. Recruiting pays the people upstairs better than selling ever paid you, and the direction of that arrangement never changes. The starter kit makes its second appearance here. $7 in 1954. You bought yours. The woman you just recruited bought hers. The woman she recruits will buy one too. The kit isn't quite a ticket to the floor. It is, however, a ticket sold to you at your own expense, to a room you're renting at your own expense, to sell a product you purchased at your own expense. The Tupperware company's overhead on this arrangement is approximately the cost of a training pamphlet and Helen's cheerfulness, which appears to be self-replenishing. Of course, there are women earning real money in this. There are. Letters exist, in an archive in the Smithsonian, which is a sentence that should not be as moving as it is, where women describe buying cars in their own names and paying for their children's college. In 1954, a woman couldn't open a bank account without her husband's signature in many states. Tupperware income sat in a different category than housekeeping money. It was hers in a way almost nothing else was. 30 unpaid hours and the first money that was ever entirely hers, riding home in the same purse. Nobody in Kissimmee loses any sleep over the combination. You don't run the numbers again. You ran them last week, on the back of an order form, and the order form is still in the drawer, still right. The minimum wage doesn't apply to you, but it's still out there, being $1 an hour, for comparison. The starter kit doesn't pay you back for having itself. You close the order book. The hall closet holds 14 units of the Wonderlier bowl that didn't move last Thursday. They'll move eventually. That's what you tell the closet. The closet, dark, full, and unconvinced, does not respond, but it has the general posture of something that has heard this before. You run out of strangers faster than you expected. The party method works on warm rooms, and warm rooms are made of people who already like you, which means every friendship you have is now also a sales territory. You catch yourself appraising a church luncheon for prospects. Your sister-in-law has hosted twice and has started letting the phone ring. There's a particular silence that falls when you walk into a coffee klatch with your sample case, and you've learned to talk over it. The line between friend and customer was never drawn anywhere. You're the one who has to walk it. The booking call is its own performance. The training manual suggests 10 to 15 calls to confirm 8 attendees, which means you spend Tuesday evening on the kitchen phone doing arithmetic about who owes whom a favour. Your neighbour Patricia has been to 2 parties this spring. She'd come to a third, but something in her voice when she says yes has the texture of a woman who is being very polite. You write her name down anyway. The address book is both your inventory and your conscience, and right now it has opinions. The hostess gift, by the way, is not a gift. It's a free item from the catalogue, awarded after 5 to 12 women show up, sit in the living room for 2 to 3 hours, drink your coffee, and buy enough that the party qualifies. Your friend Janet spends a week on the phone, rearranges her furniture, bakes a coffee cake, and hands her Tuesday night to you. In exchange, she receives 1 Wonderlier bowl in Millionaire's Lime. Janet is gracious about this. Janet is always gracious. That's why you call Janet. The games are where it gets architectural. You pass a Tupperware bowl around the circle while someone hums. The music stops. The woman holding it has to answer a question. Favourite recipe, best kitchen tip, something easy, warm, and impossible to fail. It feels spontaneous. It was printed in a manual in Kissimmee, Florida, reviewed by a committee, and field tested for maximum comfort to commitment ratio. The bowl is the product. The game is the demonstration. Nobody in the room is wrong to enjoy it. That's what makes it work. Meanwhile, the actual sell happens in the space between the game and the coffee refill. You hold up the seal, the paint can lid burp that couldn't move a single unit off a department store shelf, and you press it, release one edge with your thumb, and let the air escape with that small, satisfied exhale. Then you pass it around. Every woman in the room practices the seal. Every woman in the room succeeds. The bowl clicks shut under their hands and they feel, briefly, competent and correct. That feeling has a price, and the price is a real number on a single industrial wage, but the seal just worked for them personally, and the coffee is still hot. Margaret Voss, the top demonstrator in your district, runs her parties with the calm of a woman diffusing something. She sets the pastel containers out under the lamp where the colours catch best. Sable next to marigold, beetroot at the end to anchor the row. She pours coffee before anyone asks. When the room laughs, she laughs a half beat after, watching the table. She's booked 6 parties off this one already. You've booked 2, maybe 3 if Patricia actually answers. The week's ledger, if anyone kept one, would say 4 evenings, 62 miles on your own car, and 9 booking calls that converted to 3 confirmations. The orders will need to be processed, then collected, then delivered. Door to door, in your car on your own time. The 14 Wonderlier bowls in the hall closet are watching this math with something that isn't quite sympathy. The address book is getting shorter. Not empty, but you can feel the edges of it now in a way you couldn't 6 months ago. You flip to the ends and pause at a name you've been skipping. You write a small question mark next to it. It's not a no, it's a not yet. In this business, not yet is basically an appointment. You meet your manager once a week, a woman named Helen with a leather date book and a 5% interest in everything you sell. Carol recruited you into Helen's unit, which means Helen earns a commission on your parties forever, which is why Helen keeps Carol stocked with pink brochures. She hosts rallies in her finished basement, panelled, carpeted, and faintly triumphant, where 15 demonstrators sing company songs and report their weekly totals out loud, in order. Helen applauds every number. Helen also writes every number down. Encouragement and accounting performed simultaneously, and you can't always tell which one is talking. Helen has a manager too, a woman named Maxine who drives a newer car and earns an override on Helen's override. Maxine hosts her own rallies, for managers only, in a room that has a wet bar and framed motivational quotes. One of them says, "If we build the people, they'll build the business." Maxine has it in needlepoint. The quote is Brownie Wise's. The needlepoint is Maxine's own idea. Above Maxine, there's a distributor. The distributor earns a percentage on the commissions that Maxine earns on the overrides that Helen earns on your parties. You have never met the distributor. The distributor has probably never met you. But the distributor has a very clear picture of your weekly totals because Helen wrote them down. Managers earn 5 to 8% on downline sales. Recruit enough demonstrators, and you can earn more from their selling than from your own. Helen knows this. Helen knew it the week Carol first mentioned your name at a rally. When Helen finally called to welcome you, she was warm and specific. She mentioned your name twice. She mentioned your kids once. She mentioned the income right at the end, almost as an afterthought. It wasn't an afterthought. A demonstrator named Edith sits 2 seats down from you at Helen's basement rally. Edith has been doing this for 3 years. She nets about $30 a week most weeks. She recruited one demonstrator last spring, a neighbour named Doris, and Doris's parties add a small, reliable number to Edith's bottom line without Edith driving anywhere. Edith is now very interested in recruitment. Edith has started calling it building her team, which is what Helen calls it, which is what the training manual calls it. The language moves downward through the structure efficiently. Of course, nobody calls it a pyramid. The FTC will look at the structure in the 1970s and spend some time considering the word, and then not use it. In the meantime, you're in Helen's basement, and Helen is reading totals, and the woman who had the highest number this week gets a small round of applause that feels genuinely warm, because it is genuinely warm. Helen claps like she means it. She does mean it. Helen also earns 5% of that woman's number, which she has already written in the date book, and the 2 facts coexist without apparent difficulty. The rally ends with a song. You know the song because you've been here 6 times. It has a verse about growth, and a verse about friendship, and a chorus that rhymes achieve with believe. Everyone sings it standing up. Helen conducts with one hand, date book in the other, like a choir director who has also just balanced the books. You drive home afterward through quiet suburban streets, past dark kitchens and lit televisions, and you think about Doris and Edith and who you might call tomorrow. The address book is in your purse. It always is. You realize at some point that the real money isn't in bowls. Helen explains it plainly at a rally. A manager earns a slice of every demonstrator underneath her, so the fastest way up is not selling more, it's recruiting. Suddenly, you're looking at your best customers differently. Marjorie, who works every room she's in. Pat, who needs the money since her husband's hours got cut. You hear yourself giving Marjorie the same speech the demonstrator once gave you, over your own kitchen sink. Word for word, as it turns out. The speech has a shape. You don't improvise it. The training materials have a suggested arc. Open with the product, pivot to the opportunity, close with the vision. You've heard it enough times that the pivot lands exactly where it always does, between the second cup of coffee and the moment when the other person runs out of reasons to say no. Marjorie tilts her head. She asks if it's hard. You say it's whatever you put into it, which is the approved answer, and also technically true. Recruiting does something specific to your calendar. It doesn't just add a line item. It doubles the invisible hours because now you're coaching someone else through the same 10 to 15 booking calls per party, the same drives across town, the same late-night order form arithmetic. Sandra, one of the first women you bring in, calls you on a Tuesday night with a question about carbon paper. It's 10:40. You answer. This is not in the job description. There is no job description. Once Marjorie is in, you want Marjorie to succeed because her sales are your commission. So you drive to her first party early and carry her case up the steps. You straighten her display cloth. You stand in the kitchen doorway while she runs the game, nodding at the right moments, proud, alert, and approximately 5% invested. The company calls this mentorship. It mostly is. The company has a word for this process. They call it building your team, which is the equivalent of calling a recruitment drive a friendship expansion program, which is, in a way, exactly what it is. Brownie Wise's phrase is, if we build the people, they'll build the business. It's stitched into rally banners. It's quoted at you by Helen with the conviction of someone who has decided to find it inspiring rather than circular. You quote it to Marjorie. Marjorie writes it down. Here's what you are now. A demonstrator who sells, a manager who recruits, a trainer who coaches, and an unpaid administrative assistant who fields late-night carbon paper questions. You are also still a wife, a mother, a neighbour, and the person responsible for making sure there is food in the Frigidaire by 6 o'clock. The calendar does not acknowledge that these are different jobs. It just fills up. Sandra's first party goes well. She calls you afterward, voice high and a little startled, like the whole thing worked in a way she wasn't fully prepared for. You feel something that is genuinely warm. It lands next to the number, Sandra's sales total, already calculating in the back of your head, producing a small and specific percentage that is yours. That night, you write, Sandra, a congratulations note. You also write her total in your own ledger, in blue ink, under yours. The structure is elegant, the way a mousetrap is elegant. You don't need to push very hard. The women you're recruiting already need the money, already want the recognition, already understand that the regular economy has priced them out of both. You're not selling them something foreign. You're handing them the same door you walked through, which was the only door available, which genuinely did open. You face it eventually because a customer says it to your face. There's a plastic container at Woolworths for 10 cents that does roughly the same thing your $1.39 bowl does. You have a script for this. Quality, the seal, the lifetime guarantee, and the script mostly works. But the truth is stranger than the script. What you're selling was never just the bowl. It's the afternoon, the coffee, the room of women, the permission to gather. Woolworths sells containers. You sell the occasion. Nobody itemizes it that way on the receipt. Lustroware is the container in question. It sits on the Woolworths shelf in a stack of 6, priced between 10 and 29 cents depending on the size, which is an honest price for what it honestly is. Consumer Reports tested both in 1956 and concluded that Tupperware preserved food better, real margin, not fiction, but also noted that cheaper equivalents existed if you were not particular about the margins. You are selling to women who are particular. That's the job. The Woolworths container, it should be said, does not burp. It has a lid that sits on top in the manner of all lids everywhere, doing approximately lid-related things, making no promises. There is no theatre to it. A woman picks it up, puts it in her cart, goes home, and that's the entire relationship. The lustroware lid has never once made a room go quiet. The burp deserves its own accounting. You've done this demonstration dozens of times now, but it still works, which is either a testament to the engineering or to the human capacity for small theatrical delight. You press the center of the seal down, then release one edge with your thumb, and the air escapes. A short, soft exhale, like the container has been holding its breath since Massachusetts. You pass it around. Every woman in the room performs the burp in turn, and every woman in the room laughs. The bowl is passing through 12 sets of hands. The bowl is meeting people. The Woolworths container has never met anyone. Harriet Fisk, 3 seats from the hostess and the one who raised the Woolworths' objection in the first place, presses the seal a second time after it comes back around to her. She doesn't say anything. She just does it again, quietly, the way you press an elevator button you already pressed. The colour names earn their keep here. You're not holding a plastic bowl. You're holding Millionaire's Lime. The woman next to you is holding Marigold. Sable is on the table next to the coffee cake, dark, composed, and significantly more serious than the coffee cake warrants. These are not the colours of industrial kitchen storage. They are the colours of a curated domestic life, the kind that suggests someone made a decision rather than just opened a drawer. Woolworths sells you a container. Tupperware offers to characterize you. The price argument has a real answer, and the real answer is the seal, and the seal is genuinely good. A 1950 Frigidaire is small enough that every inch of shelf space is a negotiation. Leftovers in a loose-lidded lustroware stack, unevenly, leak, collapse into each other. The Tupperware seal holds. The Tupperware seal stacks. In a refrigerator that small, that is not a minor feature. The leftover gravy finally has an address, and yet the math still lands where it lands. A 7-piece set retails for $3.95. That's a real purchase on a single industrial wage in 1951. Not impossible, not frivolous, but considered. The woman who writes the check is not confused about what she's doing. She knows Woolworths exists. She writes the check anyway. Woolworths is open 6 days a week. It doesn't know her name. You save for months to attend the Jubilee because the annual celebration of your unpaid labor is not, itself, paid for. The train ticket to Florida comes out of your margin. The hotel, the meals, the new dress, yours, yours, yours. 3,000 women are doing the same math in 3,000 kitchens, and nearly all of them decide it's worth it, including you. You pack the goods suitcase. Your husband manages the children for 4 days, an arrangement described around the neighborhood as babysitting. You board the train going south. Kissimmee, Florida in early September is approximately the temperature of a decision you already regret. The air is thick enough to wear. The hotel lobby could rent itself out as a greenhouse. Lake Tehopekaliga sits at the edge of everything, glittering in a way that suggests it has absolutely no opinions about how far you've travelled. You check into your hotel room, hang the new dress, and discover that 4 days in a shared conference room with 3,000 women who all sell the same thing you sell feels, against all reasonable expectation, like coming home. The Jubilee, in practice, is part sales conference, part county fair, part tent revival, and the tent revival part is not a metaphor. Brownie Wise runs it from the stage the way a preacher runs a congregation, call and response, collective confession, visible weeping, and a sincere belief that what's happening in this room is sacred. You are not here to be trained, you are here to be transformed. The distinction matters to nobody present and is not raised. The schedule is packed. There's a square dance on the lawn, a boat ride on the lake, a banquet with centerpieces made of Tupperware, and enough percolated coffee to qualify as a weather event. A woman named Gladys from somewhere in Ohio, loud, generous, and instantly familiar, ends up at your table for dinner, tips her chair back at a 45-degree angle while making a point, and somehow doesn't fall. You like her immediately. You will never see her again. Then the stage events begin. The top sellers are called forward one by one. They are given tiaras, not symbolic tiaras, actual rhinestone tiaras placed on actual heads by Brownie Wise herself, who pauses to straighten each one the way a mother straightens a collar before church. Diamond brooches follow. Applause follows that. You clap until your hands ache. Beside the stage, a company photographer crouches and catches the exact moment each crowned woman forgets to breathe. The 1954 Jubilee is also carrying a rumour, something about the final ceremony, something involving a patch of ground near the fairground stage that has been roped off all week, freshly turned, carefully raked, and studiously unexplained. A woman from Scranton swears she saw a bulldozer parked behind the banquet tent. Nobody can think of a banquet-related use for a bulldozer. The rumour is enjoying itself enormously. You don't receive a Cadillac. You receive a commemorative pin and a handshake from a regional manager named Ted, who is pleasant enough and calls you by the wrong name once but recovers smoothly. This is fine. The pin is nice. You were not expecting a Cadillac. What you were expecting, what you get, is 4 days of being told that what you do matters, that your parties matter, your sales matter, your recruiting matters, that the work you do on Tuesday nights in other women's living rooms is not housework wearing a name tag. It is a career. The word is said out loud, without quotation marks, by people in positions of authority, and you find that you are hungrier for it than you realized. You didn't know until someone said it. You board the train home with the pin on your lapel and the new dress slightly wilted from the Florida air. Your husband is at the station. The children have eaten cereal for 4 days. The kitchen looks like a question nobody answered. You set down the goods suitcase, look at the kitchen, and start making a list of parties to book. You spend 4 days in Kissimmee being celebrated with a production budget your weekly check will never see. Banquets, boat rides on the lake, square dances, women called up on stage and crowned, actually crowned, with tiaras, while thousands applaud from folding chairs. On the famous day, a pink Cadillac is buried in the Florida dirt, and Brownie Wise herself digs it up with a bulldozer to award it to the year's top seller. You scream along with everyone. The woman next to you is crying. It will take years to decide what this was. The Cadillac belongs to Louise Stuck of Albany, New York, and it is pink in a way that 1954 does not yet have a language for. Not pale, not blush. Pink with conviction. A woman in a folding chair in Florida is watching a bulldozer unearth a car that cost more than a year of her commissions, and the crowd treats this as the most natural thing that has ever happened. 3,000 women traveled to Kissimmee at their own expense. Flights, meals, hotel, to watch someone else receive a car. The Jubilee rewards one woman with a Cadillac and the other 2,999 with folding chairs and a long ride home. Mary Kay Ash is watching from somewhere in Texas, taking notes. She'll remember this in about 12 years. Brownie Wise is the architect of all of it. She coined, "If we build the people, they'll build the business," which sounds warm and is, in practice, a fairly efficient way to describe a self-sustaining sales engine that requires no salary. She runs the Jubilee the way a revival preacher runs a tent meeting. The structure is part ceremony, part confession, part competitive sport. A demonstrator named Marguerite, small, sunburned, and visibly rehearsed, walks onto the stage in low heels, clutching a small envelope containing her quarterly numbers, and a woman in white gloves pins a diamond brooch to her lapel with the concentration of a jeweler resetting a stone. The brooch is real, the income floor is not. The recognition is not fake. The brooch pin leaves a real hole in a real lapel. In 1954, your name appears nowhere professionally. Your credit doesn't exist in your own name. Your work is called helping. Brownie Wise puts your name in a company newsletter that goes to 9,000 dealers and calls what you do a career, out loud, on a stage, in front of a crowd. That lands differently than it would now. The tiara is plastic. The feeling is not. And yet the numbers don't move. You return home with a sunburn and an order pad and the same contractor classification you left with. The Jubilee does not appear on your pay stub because you don't have a pay stub. Next week holds 3 more parties and the same arithmetic it always holds. The law has very precise opinions about who counts. Meanwhile, Business Week is printing Brownie Wise on its cover. April 17, 1954. First woman on the cover. The headline does not say, "Manages 9,000 women who own their own cars and pay their own phone bills and receive no benefits." It says Vice President. It says $25 million in annual sales. Both of these things are true, in the way that an iceberg is technically just floating. The Jubilee runs every year. The tiaras are awarded every year. The bulldozer, or some version of it, performs every year. And every year about 3,000 women take vacation time from lives that do not technically include vacation time, spend money that came out of their own commissions, and fly to Florida to be told their work matters. Most of them believe it. Some of them are right. You step off the train with a tan, a tote bag of company literature, and a head full of applause, and within an hour you're standing at your own stove making dinner. The transition takes no time at all because nobody renegotiated anything while you were gone. The laundry waited. The children's questions waited. On Thursday, you'll be in a living room in your sample case posture, booking calls in the hallway by Friday. The tiara people went home to this too, all 3,000 of them. The Jubilee runs once a year. The kitchen runs daily. The order forms are still on your kitchen table from the party before you left. Carbon paper, 3 copies. The copies don't know you just watched a coronation in Kissimmee. They have their own agenda, and their agenda is arithmetic. You pull out a pencil and sit down in your travel clothes because the orders don't care that you haven't unpacked yet, and the checks need to go in by Wednesday, and if you wait until morning, someone won't get their millionaire's lime canister before the weekend. Thursday's party is already on the books. You have 8 guests confirmed, which required 11 phone calls, which took about 40 minutes on Tuesday evening and another 20 on Wednesday while the pot roast was in. The hostess, her name is Janet, supplied the living room, the percolated coffee, and 7 friends she'd rather not ask for a favour from again for a while. Janet gets 1 free item. She will choose the 2-quart mixing bowl, large, useful and free in the loosest sense of the word, and she will use it every week for the rest of the decade, and the company will log her contribution as a hostess gift and move on. Marlene, a manager of 2 years, once did the math on a paper bag while waiting for someone's oven timer. 3 parties a week. $22 net after gas, after the starter kit installment, after the 2 bowls that cracked in transit and came out of her pocket, not the company's. The federal minimum wage does not enter into it. Contractors aren't covered. She folds the paper bag and puts it in her purse and does not throw it away, which tells you something. What you take home is not the same number as your gross, and the gap between them is doing a lot of quiet work. The FTC looked at the structure in the 1970s. They looked, and they left. Tupperware was never classified a pyramid scheme. The math was technically fine. And yet the letters in the Smithsonian archives don't read like the letters of people doing technically fine math. A woman in Ohio writes that she bought her first car in her own name in 1957. A woman in Minnesota writes that she paid her son's first year of tuition with party earnings. Before the Equal Credit Opportunity Act of 1974, you couldn't open a line of credit without a male cosigner. The Tupperware check cleared in your name. Your name. The bank had no mechanism to care that you drove your own car and absorbed your own losses and got no pension and worked 30 hours to net $22. The check said your name on it, and that was a thing. So you stand at the sink at 11:15 on a Thursday night, rinsing the percolator basket while the house goes quiet around you, and you are tired in a way that is specifically yours. Not the tired of watching, the tired of doing. The water runs warm over your hands, and you leave it running a little longer than you need to, because it's warm and because nobody is asking you for anything in this exact minute. The window over the sink has gone black. It shows you back to yourself, a woman holding a coffee basket at midnight. The commemorative pin is in a box in the hall closet because you wore it once and it was real and it was also only once. You have a booking for Saturday. The sample case is by the door. You learn the company's origin story the way you learn scripture, in fragments, at rallies, always polished. Earl Tupper, a New Hampshire farm boy who reads self-improvement books like instruction manuals and kept journals listing the things he'd own once he was rich. He bought a black, greasy refinery waste from DuPont and spent years turning it into the smooth pastel plastic in your sample case. The brochures call this genius. The man himself never appears at the parties his fortune is built on. He doesn't like crowds. You sell his containers anyway, in rooms he will never enter. Those journals were not casual. Tupper kept them like a man who believed that writing a thing down was halfway to owning it. Future estate, future yacht, future position in the hierarchy of people who do not carry their own luggage. He'd found Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich sometime in the 1930s and treated it less like a book and more like a set of binding instructions. The journals are full of columns, what he has, what he will have, what the gap between the two requires of him. He is 22, he is 30. He is still filling in the columns. At no point does any column say plastic bowls. The universe enjoys a long setup. The raw material for all of it was industrial garbage. Polyethylene slag, the greasy, dark, foul-smelling residue left over after oil refining, the material DuPont had essentially run out of uses for. Tupper had joined DuPont in 1937, learned everything he could, left the following year, and eventually purchased this waste product cheaply enough that the price was almost an insult. DuPont considered the sale a small favor to a former employee with strange enthusiasms. They would spend the next decade reconsidering. Then he spent years, actual years, purifying it, heating it, filtering it, pressuring it into something that didn't smell like a refinery at low tide. What came out the other side was flexible, translucent, and faintly luminous in a way no plastic had managed to look before. Your sample case has one in Millionaire's Lime, one in Marigold, one in Sable, which is a name that means brown but implies a coat. The names are doing work. Tupper understood that a woman choosing a kitchen container was also choosing what kind of woman she was, and beetroot implied something entirely different from industrial beige number 4. The containers glowed softly under living room lamplight, unlike the dull petroleum-coloured plastics of the previous decade, which had all the visual warmth of a bus terminal. The seal came later. A paint can lid specifically pressed down the centre, catch the edge with your thumb, release a small exhale of displaced air, the burp. Tupper spent time on that seal the way a watchmaker spends time on a movement, filing the tolerances until the vacuum held reliably and the release felt satisfying. It was a genuinely useful innovation. It was also completely impossible to demonstrate from a department store shelf. Customers would pick it up, press it, put it down, walk away baffled. The containers sat in Macy's and Woolworths and said nothing. No one bought them. By 1951, Tupper pulled them from retail entirely. A practical man would have reconsidered the product. Tupper reconsidered the distribution model instead, which turned out to be the correct move, and one he could not have made without Brownie Wise. But Brownie Wise deserves her own telling, and she'll get it. For now, you are demonstrating a canister in Sandra Holloway's living room, pressing the lid with practiced ease, and the burp lands right on cue. You've done this perhaps 300 times. The motion is fluid. The pause before the sound is theatrical. You do not think about Earl Tupper while you do it. The polyethylene slag, the DuPont lab, the journals with their optimistic columns. You think about the next booking, and whether Sandra will host again, and whether her sister wants the marigold or the sable with her set tonight. Tupper is at headquarters. The canister performs perfectly in his absence. That was, eventually, the whole design. You read Brownie Wise's column in the company newsletter the way some women read advice columns, closely and twice. She's the vice president, a woman, which should be impossible, and her story circulates among the demonstrators like a saint's life. Divorced, broke, a single mother who sold her way out, who wrote to Earl Tupper directly and ended up running everything. Build the people, she says, and they'll build the business. You've noticed which half of that sentence you're in. You also can't help admiring her. Both things ride along together, in the same tote bag. Brownie Wise came out of Beaufort, Georgia, no degree, a failed marriage, a son to raise, and a suitcase of Stanley Home Products samples. She figured out, before any training manual told her, that women would buy things from other women in living rooms when they wouldn't buy the same thing from a shelf display. By 1951, she was outselling every retail outlet Tupperware had left. Tupper noticed. The company newsletter, Tupperware Sparks, becomes hers. The sales force becomes hers. 9,000 dealers, a sales number with 7 digits in it, and a cover story in Business Week on April 17, 1954, the first woman on that cover. She is wearing a confident expression and an extremely well-pressed blouse. A demonstrator named Gloria Chen, quiet, methodical, and stationed near the refreshment table, keeps a copy of that Business Week folded in her order binder. She doesn't mention it to guests. She just knows it's there. Wise didn't just run sales. She built a culture, which is a polite way of saying she invented a system of motivation powerful enough to substitute for a raise. The annual Jubilee held in Kissimmee, Florida at a campus called, without visible irony, Tupperware Headquarters and Home. 3,000 demonstrators traveled there in 1953 at their own expense. Boat rides on Lake Tohopekaliga, square dances, banquets with centerpieces, and at the end, the stage, and the tiaras, and the diamond brooches, and the applause. The woman being crowned drove herself here. She paid for her own hotel room. She will wear the crown for approximately 4 minutes before going home to make breakfast. The applause is real, though. That part isn't nothing. The buried Cadillac was hers too. The idea of it, the bulldozer, the timing of the reveal. You were in the crowd for that one. What you remember most isn't the car. It's the woman on the stage with the shovel-steady smile, running the whole spectacle like she'd personally rehearsed the dirt. Now, the sentence nobody says out loud at the Jubilee, every woman applauding has already done this week's math on the back of one of her own order forms. The tiara does not comment on the number. The law doesn't ask about it. Contractors are spared that conversation. Wise knew all of this. She'd done it herself. The booking calls, the driving, the late-night carbon paper. The difference is she'd turned it into an executive career, which was genuinely rare, genuinely hers, and genuinely built on a foundation of women who received far less of the architecture than she did. You read her column twice. You underline the sentence about building people. You fold the newsletter and put it in the same bag as your order forms. You have 6 parties booked for next month, and the coffee isn't going to make itself. You open a savings account with your Tupperware earnings, and the passbook has your name on it. Yours, not his. This is rarer than it sounds. A married woman can't get credit by herself. The bank wants a husband's signature the way the church wants a baptism. But cash deposited from selling bowls is cash nobody co-signed. Some women on the circuit are quietly paying for a son's college this way. One, it's whispered, is saving toward a lawyer and a fresh start. You're just saving. For what? You haven't decided. That's the novel part. It's undecided. And it's yours. The money, in practice, looks like this. A good week, 3 parties, 8 to 12 guests each, everyone in a buying mood, nets you somewhere between $40 and $50. A slow week, maybe 20. Set against the hours, the driving, the booking calls, the late paperwork while the house finally goes quiet, the math is close enough that it doesn't feel insulting. That's intentional. The math is always close enough to not feel insulting. The passbook is a physical object, and you treat it like one. Lucille Marsh, who covers the east side of town, brisk, generous, and audible from 2 houses over, keeps hers in an envelope under the dish towels. Not hidden, she'd say if asked. Just stored. The distinction matters to her. She takes it out on Sunday evenings, looks at the number, puts it back. The dish towels don't ask questions. The company never advertised the next part, because advertising it would have required admitting the problem. Women in 1955 have almost no financial infrastructure in their own names. No credit card without a husband's guarantee, no mortgage, no car loan. The Equal Credit Opportunity Act doesn't exist yet, and won't for another 19 years. Tupperware income is cash. Cash doesn't require a cosigner. It just exists, in an envelope under dish towels, in a passbook at First Federal, in a jar at the back of a shelf between the Millionaire's lime canister and the Marigold mixing bowl. The Smithsonian has the letters. Women writing to Brownie Wise's office, not to complain, not to report a shipment problem, just to say what the money did. A car, titled in her name. Tuition for a daughter who wanted to be a nurse. A deposit on a small rental property, which sounds implausible until you remember what $40 a week accumulates to over 3 years when nobody else is spending it. The letters don't editorialize. They just list what happened next. Of course, the company is not running a financial empowerment program. The company is running a sales force. Nobody in Kissimmee sat down and decided to bank on women who couldn't get bank accounts. The recruiting brochures just kept working, year after year, on exactly those women, the way an open window keeps working in a house where the door is locked. You're not supposed to think about the door. The window is lovely, and the window is genuinely lovely. The money is real. The name on the passbook is real. The son who goes to Ohio State instead of staying home to work at the mill, that's real too. So are the 25 unpaid hours, the contractor signature, and the tiara that arrived where a raise would have gone. They all sit next to each other like sable and beetroot on a well-organized shelf. You close the passbook, Sunday evening. The house has gone quiet in the particular way it does on Sunday evenings, when the week ahead hasn't started asking for anything yet. The kitchen still smells like the roast from dinner and, under that, faintly, the percolator. You run your thumb along the cover of the passbook, soft at the corner where you've held it before. You don't open it again. You already know the number. You just like knowing it's there, in your name, on the shelf, between the canister and the mixing bowl, where nobody put it but you. The dish towels are perfectly folded. The number is slightly larger than last week. You hear the news in January of 1958, the way all company news arrives, second-hand, softened, and slightly too late. Brownie Wise is out. Removed from the board, her name already coming down off the letterhead, her face gone from the next newsletter as if the printing press itself had been given instructions. No equity, no stock, a severance everyone describes differently and nobody describes as large. The woman who built every party you've ever thrown was, it turns out, an employee. You stand holding the newsletter in your kitchen. The kitchen is quiet. By 1954, Brownie Wise was running the entire sales operation. Every dealer in the country reported up a chain that ended at her desk. And the Business Week cover was framed somewhere in Kissimmee, smiling in a way that looked earned, because it was. She coined the phrase. She ran the Jubilee. She buried a Cadillac in Florida dirt with a bulldozer and handed it to Louise Stuck of Albany, New York, while 3,000 women in Kissimmee applauded so hard their palms went pink. Earl Tupper, meanwhile, was in the background, purifying slag. Now, Tupper had opinions about Brownie Wise the whole time. He found the Jubilee excessive. He found her management style theatrical. He found her, in general, difficult to give credit to without that credit reflecting somewhere complicated. The two of them had spent years in a relationship that looked, from the outside, like mutual dependence and felt, from the inside, like a very long argument about whose name went first. There are memos. The memos are not warm. Tupper fires Wise in January 1958. The severance is disputed, somewhere around $30,000 or a year's salary, depending on who is telling the story and what they need the number to do. There is no equity. There are no stock options. The company she built does not contain her name anywhere that matters financially. A shelf demonstrator named Opal, who worked 3 parties a week and kept her order forms in a shoebox, had the same equity stake as Brownie Wise, which is to say, none. Months later, not years, months, Tupper sells the company for $16 million in cash. Then he renounces his American citizenship. Then he moves to Costa Rica. He dies there in 1983, having converted polyethylene slag and one woman's organizational genius into a personal fortune he carried out of the country in his own name. Wise got nothing from the sale. The severance was the end of the sentence. There's a demonstrator somewhere right now. 1958. February. The newsletter still on the counter, working through what this means for her specifically. Her name is not in the newsletter. Her severance does not exist. She has a starter kit she paid for herself, a car she drives herself, a phone bill that arrives in her name every month. She calls 11 women to book 8 seats. She makes $40 on a good week. She does not have a stock option to be denied. In a way, the structure protected itself from the beginning. You can't fire what was never hired, and you can't cheat someone out of equity they were never offered. A woman named Wanda Holcomb, out of Dayton, Ohio, squares her order forms on the kitchen table after the 10 o'clock news and does not think about any of this. She thinks about whether the Millionaire's Lime set moves better than the Marigold. The company kept going. The parties kept happening. The coffee kept percolating in someone's kitchen in someone's suburb. The seal kept burping, and the demonstrators kept arriving at doors they'd called 10 times to confirm. Brownie Wise tried again, on her own, a cosmetics company called Cinderella. It didn't work. Earl Tupper tended his land in Costa Rica and did not appear in any follow-up Business Week profiles. The Kissimmee stage got another tiara and another top seller and another round of applause, and the woman standing in the kitchen light holding the plastic bowl that started all of this had no idea that the person most responsible for that bowl being in her hands had just been handed a disputed check and shown the door. The bowl didn't mention it. The bowl never does. You're still running parties when the second piece of news lands, months after the first. Earl Tupper has sold the company, all of it, $16 million in cash, and then, in rapid order, renounced his American citizenship and moved to Costa Rica. The fortune was built in living rooms like yours, one coffee cake at a time, by women paid in crispers and applause, and the whole apparatus changed hands without any of you being consulted, or informed, or included. Thursday's party is still on, though. You confirm it by phone, the way you always do. $16 million is a specific number, and you work with specific numbers every week. The starter kit check you wrote yourself, the Tuesday totals you copy into the ledger in blue ink. You write your numbers at the kitchen table, after the dishes. Tupper's number was written somewhere with better chairs. The difference between those two desks does not require a calculator. Tupper kept journals. This is a documented fact, and a slightly alarming one. Not just personal diaries, inventories, fantasy lists of the things he would own when the wealth arrived. Properties, cars, land, specific quantities of specific items, written down as if the writing would encourage them into being. He'd read Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich so thoroughly the binding had opinions. The journals from the lean years are full of the future, described in careful detail, waiting patiently to be collected. By 1958, he had collected it. He wrote it down. He moved to Costa Rica. He never looked back, which is consistent behavior for someone who had been writing forward his entire life. The contractor classification lands its last blow here. Independent contractor status meant no equity stake, no share in the sale, no percentage of the $16 million that your bookings, your driving, your 11 p.m. order forms, and your coffee had helped accumulate. Deborah Ellison, a demonstrator out of Columbus who'd been running parties since 1953, finishes calculating her commission on a Tuesday night order and writes the total in her ledger in blue ink. The number is correct. It has always been correct. It is simply small. Costa Rica, meanwhile, has a pleasant climate. The citizenship renunciation carries a tax implication that the financial press notes with interest and no particular judgment. Tupper will live there quietly until 1983. He will not, as far as the record indicates, attend any more jubilees. He will not receive a tiara. These are, depending on your Thursday schedule, either the worst or the best outcomes available. The company continues. New management. Same structure. The parties keep running because the parties were never really about Tupper. They were about the women who ran them, and the women are still here, still booking, still driving, still demonstrating the seal to rooms that smell like percolated coffee and someone's good perfume. The product works. The burp is still theatrical. The millionaire's lime still glows slightly greenish under a lamp in a way that makes a living room look, briefly, like a place where the future lives. Nothing about Thursday has changed except who owns Thursday. The Tupperware bowl doesn't know any of this. It sits on the demonstration table, muted, pastel, and patient, waiting to be passed around, waiting for someone's thumb to press and release the edge and let the air out with that small, satisfied sound. It has done this in thousands of living rooms. It will do it in thousands more. It holds what it's given and keeps it fresh. You confirm Thursday's party by phone. 8 guests. 10 calls to get there. The coffee cake is already planned. And so the party winds down. Tonight, you learn to operate a food container in front of witnesses and felt genuinely proud about it, which was the plan all along. You played a parlor game engineered in Florida to feel spontaneous. You drank coffee that had achieved the density of geology, bought a celery crisper for a woman you've known since the Block Association, signed a contract that called you a businesswoman and meant it only in the legal sense, and watched 3,000 women in their best dresses applaud a Cadillac being lifted out of the ground by a bulldozer. Somewhere in Kissimmee, a man who once wrote lists of things he intended to own checked off another item. But spare a thought, before you drift off, for the women who kept the whole thing running, the one who made 17 booking calls to get 3 yeses, the one who drove 40 minutes in her own car, set up on a stranger's coffee table, packed it all away at 11, and cleared $30 before expenses. The hostess who cleaned her house for 2 days and was paid in celery keeper. Their names never made the newsletter. The coffee was theirs, though. So was the laughter, most nights, and so was the passbook with the number that grew. And if this was your grandmother's world, if there's a turquoise wandalier somewhere in your family that nobody is allowed to lose the lid to, I hope tonight felt a little like visiting her kitchen. So pull the blanket up and take a quiet inventory of your own situation. A refrigerator that closes on the first try, containers with lids that mostly match. No order forms in the drawer, no booking calls owed, nobody arriving at 2 o'clock expecting a demonstration. The seal holds without an audience these days. Let your shoulders drop. Let the percolator go quiet. Let the last bowl be passed to someone else, in some other living room, a long way from here. Thank you for spending the evening in 1954 with me. If you drifted off somewhere around the carbon paper, you did it exactly right. Good night.